She's fondly referred to as Mama M-PESA. Esther Waititu built her career in banking, and now she's the Chief Financial Services Officer of Kenya's leading telco. What does it take to get to the C-suite? Let's find out. This is She Means Business. I am your host, Claire Munde. Esther, you've had quite an illustrious career in banking, and now you're termed Mama M-PESA as the Chief Financial Services Officer. Maybe you can tell us, what does it take to get to the C-suite?
It's a journey, that's number one. And it's interesting that now I'm called Mama M-PESA because my first stint into being called Mama was with my children. And so now being called that at work is a big transition, because I started working perhaps at the age of 22, right? And at that time, you're very young, you're very feisty, and, you know, the C-suite looks so exciting and very, you know, intriguing. So I started off, you know, at the very bottom. The other day I did an interview where they said, what was your first paying job? And it was actually in a coffee shop, right? Where I was serving people cappuccinos, and I could not understand how people could spend 250 shillings buying a cup of coffee. Because, you know, when you're fresh out of school, I mean, that 250 can buy you new clothes, right? So that's where my journey started. But then fast forward, and then, you know, going into banking, I started off as a graduate trainee, as that young girl who sat at the counter in the bank, writing out bankers' checks. We hadn't digitized as much then. We were on our journey to doing that, so it was handwritten. It was also being a teller on the front line. And so my journey was that of just courage and resilience. A job came up to be an analyst. I really didn't understand what the breadth of the role meant, but I did apply, and I studied zealously to make sure I get the job. And that's how I moved into being an analyst in corporate finance. And that opened up a whole new world of what people do and how businesses operate. Although I was the analyst writing all the hard work, doing all the minutes for a lot of the transactions we're doing, it taught me what makes an economy tick, and that truly the decisions that we make in whatever we do have an impact on others. And so I kept yearning for more. And then the next part was I wanted to work outside of the country, because I was fascinated. I was like, what else is beyond Kenya? What else is beyond these beautiful borders that we have? And I learned and went to school completely here in Kenya. I never went overseas. My parents were very clear. We're a family of 5. The only way they would make sure that all of us went to uni is all of us being here. And they'd had many horror stories of people whose children went, and then they were unable to afford sustaining them there. So everything was here. So I was still really fascinated by, you know, what the outside world could present. And so the timing, I did move when we moved to South Africa. But in between that, of course, you get married, you get pregnant, and all these things happen at not the best time. Because when we were moving, I was still pregnant when I got the job, and I was not always confident that my employer at that time would allow me to move or transition me as a pregnant young lady. But, you know, when you're clear that this is what you want and you're determined to make it work, I think people see right through the determination and they give you a chance. And so just as I had my children, my twin girls, we moved to South Africa. The delivery of those children was also drama. Like, you know, careers can also be drama, but that was equally drama. And it's not easy, because as a lady, I do remember having this vivid thought as I was expressing in the mother's room in the bank that I worked at then, and I was, you know, deprived of sleep, and I was going into a sales performance meeting. I was looking at my male colleagues and how they even went out and had drinks with their clients. They are all, and I'm like, oh my God, all I was doing last night was burping my children and changing diapers. And you're still measured at exactly the same level, right? So I think as women, you have a higher level of performance where you have to do a lot more. And then more so doing that in a foreign country where you're trying to learn a new culture. I think some of the things that people don't talk about as you transition careers in different countries and different jurisdictions is character development. right? I didn't realize how, the impact of apartheid was in South Africa, where, the black empowerment movement was a big thing. So as we went into meetings, we'd have to make sure there's equal representation from all the different minority groups, which is something I'd never experienced here. So in my journey, what that taught me is that you have to walk into a room and appreciate what is going on, both what is said and what is unsaid, in order for you to be able to move forward. I remember going for a couple of meetings as a product manager then, and I'd enter the room and they'll be like, oh, okay, are you the lady who's doing our notes, the BEE representative? And I'm like, but why would they say that?
Yeah.
Because where we came from in Kenya, we may have thought we're disadvantaged, but absolutely not. We're all accepted for what we're able to do. But that was one of the things that helped me as I then went through my different journey in my career, to show you that when you're managing regions and when you're managing people, don't only just look at what is on the surface. You have to go a little bit deeper. What are the vibes that you're getting? What is the individual sitting across from you going through? How are they raised? How have they been integrated? And when they give their perspective, is that a perspective that you've experienced? So you have to be willing to listen, and you have to be willing to explore. So that's what that experience working out in South Africa taught me. And then a lot of independence. I was covering a region at that time, and Botswana. I thought you'd always have to fly. I discovered you could drive from Johannesburg to Gaborone, and I was doing it on my own. Yeah, so those are the things that living out of the country and experiencing different things, we take it for granted. If I want to go to Nakuru, for example, I can hop into the car and I can go. But going to a different country, crossing borders, teaches you how to then think differently when you're launching solutions. When you're sitting on an executive committee and you're hearing different voices and your breadth of stakeholders is so wide, how do you incorporate all those different lessons, and how do you navigate areas that you haven't been in? So I think all these steps were quite foundational in terms of getting me to where I am, but it takes time, right? Yeah. For me to sit on an executive committee, it actually took close to 18 years or 17 years of hard work, harnessing on all of these issues, and also failing sometimes. Not every job I took did I excel immediately. There's some tough times where you had to have difficult conversations with those who managed me, but that was part of how you build, yeah? And the more senior you become, also you must expect to receive both positive and negative feedback. We all love positive feedback. I mean, tell me I'm looking nice, I'd love that. Yeah. But start to tell me that the decision that you made me feel in this way, and this is the impact that it's had. It needs courage for you to accept that you can also be wrong, right? And that you also have still ways to go. So it's also quite a journey of humility and courage, and being able to truly face the truths, which sometimes are ugly truths, but then that help you to grow.
Wow. I think that's been quite a journey. I mean, from back to back, moving different countries, having twins, trying to have that balance. I'd like us to talk a little bit about some of the challenges. You've spoken about them, but throughout your career, you've said it's not an overnight thing. 17, 18 years is quite a journey. What has been one of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome?
There are lots of challenges, and I think for me, the one that shaped me by far the most is one around navigating and integrating my work and my life home. So for me, that's been one of the biggest challenges. You see, when you're young in your career and you're also starting the journey of having a family, and you really want to get to the top, it takes a lot of work, discipline, and commitment. And when you're much younger, sometimes drawing the boundaries between how much work you need to do versus how much life you have to do is a very difficult balance to come to. So I think the first lesson, the most challenging lesson for me was, at the point at which, especially when my children were much, much younger, it's getting the right balance between being a mother and being a wife. So the more I got involved in my career, I was leading teams. I was then, understanding different products and solutions that ordinarily had not been exposed to. Meant that I had to spend a lot of time doing research. Meant I had to do a lot of time networking. At the same time, we've got demands from those that are close to you. I used to find, especially in the beginning, which was a challenge, is the more I excelled in work, the more my home situation started to suffer. right? And so with time, the biggest challenge that I had to overcome is how do I get these to work together? It can never be a perfect balance. I was looking for a perfect balance, and I nearly burnt out doing exactly that, because you're going to stay awake reading. You're going to spend a weekend, sitting by a poolside with your children, cheering for your children, and then you're going to come back to work tired. Yeah, the thing that you didn't want. So learning how to put appropriate boundaries has been one of the biggest challenges, but understanding that it's not going to be 50-50. It's going to be 60-40 sometimes. It's going to be 70-30 sometimes. But looking back and understanding the impact that you have made in the spaces that you have been is what you should be looking for. So that has been one of the big challenges that I've had to overcome with time. It's not perfect. It's always going to be a work in progress. But to see myself where I am today means that the learnings, the insights that I've gotten have actually then been useful. So it's also nice to just take a look in the rear mirror and see what you've achieved.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at some of those achievements, because sometimes we're just focused on what next. And you spoke about working in the coffee shop and looking at that 250 shillings coffee looks so expensive. Of course, now it's not much. But maybe this is She Means Business. Talk to us about some of the decisions that women should have in mind when it comes to their careers to make sure that they're able to negotiate properly. You said balancing is tough, and sometimes you feel you have to work that much harder. So how do you make sure you negotiate right for yourself as you try to make that balance, which is never going to be perfect with your family life?
Yes. So I think as a woman, as you come into any negotiation and when you think about what you need to do, I think first of all you have to know who you are and you have to know your worth, right? And once you know who you are and your worth, because all of us, and I'm sure at Mama M-PESA, I work at Safaricom not because they like me as an individual, but because there's a certain skill that I bring, there's a certain level of experience that I have that I bring to the table. So throwing that back to women and what I'd advise them to do is know your worth, yeah? Know what you're able to do, because you are actually providing a service to whoever you're going to be working with. Whether you're in a business, as an entrepreneur, be clear around what your value proposition is to the customers that you serve. As an employee like I am, let's also be very clear about the skills that you bring to the table and then what you're going to enable that business to deliver. So once you understand who you are, your strengths, your weaknesses, then you can then enter the space of then what is the value of what I then present. You must also take into consideration where you're going to be working, who you're negotiating with. You must also do some homework, right? You need to ask around and say, in this area, what generally does this service go for, right? And then make sure that you're within that range, right? So you go in negotiating knowing the product that you're going to be delivering, the value proposition as an individual you're going to be giving, but then also understanding the environment in which you're going to be requesting for delivery of that, for payment of the service or skill you're going to be providing. So that's number one. And when you go in with the best price possible. Because remember, whoever you're negotiating with is always going to try and bring the cost down, right? So make sure you go in at the best possible price for you, with a floor that allows you that if you get to the floor, if you don't get your best price, but you get to the floor of what you're looking for, you're still going to be okay. So it's also important that you also understand, especially when you're thinking about negotiating for pay or for delivery of a product or a service, understand what your inputs look like, right? I'm sure you've gone to a very good school. I'm sure you've invested in some form of coaching, some form of mentorship. Those are all the costs that you have. And so the product that you're going to be delivering you have to make sure that you're breaking even. Remember, in business, you have your revenue, you've got your expenses, and your revenue must always be more than what you put in from an expense point of view. So that should be at least where you go in, which is you should not be losing out on the expertise that you've built over time, right? So that needs to be a going in position, and do not feel shy, because if someone values and someone needs the service or the skill that you have, trust me, they'll be willing to pay for it. Okay? So don't sell yourself short. I know sometimes people say it's hard to come across a good customer. It's hard to come across a good employer. Yeah? But at the end of the day, if you sell yourself short, you're going to be constantly in a place of unhappiness. You're going to feel undervalued. You're going to feel underutilized. And so try by all means to get what your worth is at that particular point in time, and then continue building, and do not be shy to speak for yourself. I assure you, as a woman, we always like our work to be seen. Isn't that right? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Our colleagues, our gentlemen, they tell you what you're going to be getting. They don't wait for show and tell, right? Yeah. And so we have to borrow a bit from that to say, this is what I can give you, this is what my potential is, and ask for it. Sometimes another strategy could be, let me get in, then let me demonstrate. But as you're demonstrating, please, women, also blow your own trumpet. There's nothing wrong in blowing your own trumpet, because it's in that people start to value what you're good at, and then that's when you'll be able to get the value that you require. So rules for negotiation for me is first of all, be self-aware. Understand what your needs and requirements are. Understand what the market going rate is, and make sure that you're getting the right return for what you're putting in.
Wow, that's powerful. Now, you're the Chief Financial Services Officer. I'd like to know what has been the best financial advice that you've been given, and which one is the best advice that you've been given and you actually used?
So this advice is not even going to come in my current role. This advice is going to come when I was a teenager, right? Okay. And it came from my mother, right? So I remember when I was young, and I remember I told you how I was working in the bank as a graduate trainee and operations assistant. As soon as my salary could afford me a car, that's the first thing I wanted to do, okay? My mother was very clear. She said, yeah, you're still going to be able to meet your friends, you're still going to be able to move around, but this asset is going to depreciate. And that's the first time I started to understand what a depreciating asset actually meant. Her advice instead was, before you get anything that's going to help you with your day-to-day operational expenses, put aside a little bit of money that will help you to have something to fall back in the future. And so her advice at that time, and I can't promise you that I followed it to the T, but I understand it now, and this is the principle I apply. She was like, buy even a small place, take a mortgage with the amount of money you're going to take your car loan, have a place that's your own. You don't have to live there. You can rent out the place. But you'll always have a place that you can fall back on. That's number one. Number two, you'll also have another stream of income that ordinarily you would not have. And then you can still enjoy the car when you get it. So translating into now, it's always ensure that you pay yourself first, but you make an investment that pays for itself. Because you don't know what life is going to bring or what it's going to present in the future. But having a little store somewhere that keeps giving you some form of interest, you know, my mom's example was a house. It could be even investing as simply as, you know, a treasury bond. The rates are quite good right now. Yeah, it's long term. You can get one for 5 years. You can get one for 10 years. So you get a little bit of interest. So when you do have that rainy day, there's something that's paying you back as you're still able to take care of your living expenses from a day-to-day point of view. So really the advice there is save first, invest actually. Save and invest first, and then you can do whatever you want to do with your money thereafter.
Wow, that's great. And what's the worst business or financial mistake you've made?
Oh my goodness. I never should be saying this on camera.
Tell us so that we don't make it.
It's very exciting when you work and operate with a group of friends and you do joint investments, right? So I think for me, one of the interesting investments that we made, and this was especially when we were much younger, is we invested in a business that basically maybe. So when we're in uni, we used to hang out quite a bit, and we'd go out, and on the weekends you'd find that, you know, the next day people had hangovers and stuff like that. So we were like, this is a business idea. Let's find something that cures hangovers for people so they can go out more. Needless to say, we made the investment, but we made nothing in return because the ones who drink are not going to pay you. So So yeah, that was one of the, and we did invest. It was a group of friends who invested in this. It didn't quite work out. So I think the biggest insight for me is when you make investment decisions, do a bit of research, yeah. And this is one of the things we also do at Safaricom, is we do small experiments to see if it's going to work. So don't go in 100% on these investments. Where you're unsure and you're truly doing an experiment, test a little bit, see how it goes, and then keep course correcting as you go. And that allows you to either invest more or invest less. So I think the big insight for me around some of these decisions where I've lost money is test it first, especially models that are not very clear, not really understood. And then also don't jump into what everyone else is doing, right? So, because when you jump into it, it reduces the demand for the product. It saturates the demand, meaning the price comes down. And so your return on investment also becomes a little less. So I think it's just take small steps, invest slowly, watch and see, assess on an ongoing basis that allows you to make more investments.
Wow, wow, wow. Now, as we come to an end, maybe you could tell us what has been one of your greatest achievements. It can be professionally, it can be personally.
Okay, so one of my greatest achievements, this is an interesting one. And maybe I can give you from both perspectives. Let me give it to you as a human being,
yes.
As Esther without the title, and let me give it to you, Esther with the title. The easiest one to give is, of course, with the title. And I think for me, one of the biggest achievements has really been how we've been able to transform lives with M-PESA. Although I've been at M-PESA for about 1.5 years now, I think one of the big things that I feel is a great sense of achievement is just ensuring that we're able to keep Kenyans financially connected with their wallets, and just keeping that going, making sure that they're able to, spend, that they're able to save, they're able to invest, and quite recently we also introduced insurance as part of this, so that's really cool. So seeing that every one of our over 30 million subscribers will have access to insurance is a very big thing for me. And then on the personal side, I'd like to say the biggest achievement for me is actually being a wife and a mother, right? Because that also in many ways is very humbling. My children are now become adults. They just turned 18. And so for me, that's a massive achievement that I've been able to walk this journey until a point at which they become adults, and doing that with a supportive partner to walk with me.
Wow, that's awesome. And finally, some tips you could give for women who are watching She Means Business on how to just make sure that they're getting the best out of their life.
So for the women who are watching, I think my biggest advice will be network. Yeah, you never know where your next opportunity is going to come from. So I'll encourage women to network. And network doesn't mean like you have to go to a business club, or it can be in the small spaces that you're in within your community. You can be the convener of your neighborhood, community. At church, you can serve. In the office, you can be the one who brings people together to have a good time. You never know where your opportunities are going to come from. For me, a lot of my progression opportunities came from those that I worked with. Right? They came from people who we were peers with, and they grew much faster than I did, and they lent a hand when I went for an interview and I found there was someone I'd worked with before. They were like, yeah, I've worked with her, she's great, bring her on. So expand your network, be good to people, genuinely be good. And where there are errors or there are issues, point at the issue, don't point at the person, right? And that way I want to encourage, especially those who are in business, that the network is how you build your products and solutions. For those who are employed, that's how you upskill yourself to get to the next level, and ask questions and be curious. Yeah, and this I take from my very first experience. I was like, I'd love to be able to buy a cup of coffee for 250 shillings, right? I was curious to say I want to become an analyst when I didn't really completely understand what that role meant, but I was willing to try. Yeah, I was in banking for 20 years, and I said I want to go into fintech. Yeah, it's uncomfortable because I had to learn new skills. So don't be afraid to do that. That is uncomfortable. Stretch yourself, put your hand out, and you will get the assistance that you need. There's the power of manifestation. When you speak something out loud to more than one person, to your network, it will come back to you.
Wow, thank you. So you've heard it from Esther Waititu. Stretch yourself, be ready to get uncomfortable, and be good to people. This has been She Means Business. I have been your host, Claire Munde. Have a good one.
To watch this story and more, download the Citizen Digital app today.
Kenya's #1 app, Citizen Digital.